To truly understand the levels of consciousness, you also have to understand why you have levels of consciousness in the first place, or why people have different levels of consciousness. This is not obvious for many people, I guess, and many people don't even know about the scale and the map of consciousness and that there is such levels. So in this video I will be discussing first why you have levels of consciousness and why they're different, and then go through the whole scale because I've done some upgrades to it since the last video. I added some more information which I want to explain. So this will be basically a basis understanding of the scale of consciousness, starting with why there is such a levels in the first place. So what happens when you're born as a newborn baby is that you're a wide open beingness or wide open pure consciousness as a baby when you come into this life. And then, because this planet is full of negativity with negative people, or people have a lot of negativity buried in their unconscious mind, even if they're pretty normal, regular, pretty good people on the surface, everybody has buried a lot of negativity in the unconscious. And the mass consciousness is therefore also very polluted and full of negativity. And when the wide open, pure and ultra-sensitive baby is exposed to this negativity from the parents and the surroundings and the mass consciousness, it creates what you might call a rejection trauma in the baby, because anything less than unconditional love from the surroundings will create such a trauma, even if the parents are well-meaning and pretty good. So this rejection trauma becomes the seed of the unconscious mind, and it splits the personality structure off from consciousness itself. So you get an artificial construct which becomes your personality and your unconscious and subconscious makeup as you grow up. And it's built layer by layer like an onion from this initial wounding or this initial rejection trauma, this initial separation from source or from consciousness itself. Because the rejection trauma creates this separation, and it's basically a massive resistance sitting very close to source, which generates a lot of friction. So basically it generates pure rage. So at the core of everybody's personality there is pure rage and hate and resistance to life and resistance to the higher mind, resistance to your own self or own consciousness or your own source. And this is what I call the inner Lucifer. So the inner Lucifer is like the sitting there at the center of everybody's artificial personality construct, which you might refer to as a prison, because that's what it becomes. After this initial separation or split off, which is considered normal on this planet, although if you have severe trauma, you will have multiple split-offs, which creates multiple personality disorder, like they do in MK Ultra mind control, government programs they did before, or maybe still do. So the initial single split-off or single personality disorder is actually considered normal, but it's still a disorder. It's still not the natural state. The natural state is to be one with consciousness, one with the universe, which is made of consciousness, and one with everything. That's the natural state, and the whole personality complex that's built from the unconscious mind and up, like an onion, becomes your prison, because you cannot escape it without working on yourself, and that can take an entire lifetime or maybe even many lifetimes, depending. So when you're basically an adult, like 18, 20 years old, this prison is more or less completed, with all the layers of the prison or the onion built on top of each other from that root cause, root separation or initial separation of wounding. And this becomes your destiny unless you work on yourself. That psychological makeup, or that makeup of the unconscious mind split off, becomes your level of consciousness. It crystallizes into what you might call a prison, but you shouldn't see it as a victimizing thing, because that's just how this game works, right? And you're supposed to have this prison. That's the game. How can you escape the inner prison? I mean, most people don't even know that they are in a prison, so they will usually not get very far in one life. So even just knowing about it and knowing about this scale is a big step in the right direction if you want to escape it. Although you have to consider that many people are also happy in the prison. I mean, you can be happy depending on what level and you're at, basically, from this prison, this system that's been created in you, this artificial complex. I mean, many people can be happy, but they have a lot of stuff repressed, which can be triggered at any time. They can happen. They can be a big happening in their life. They can lose somebody they love or something, and then suddenly their whole prison complex is triggered, and they get into a depression because they have no preparation for how to handle these kind of things. So you're living on the surface. You can be happy on the surface, which many people are, and still have this prison and be locked inside this prison, which everybody is. You cannot escape that when you're born into a negative planet like this. So, okay, that crystallizes around when you reach adulthood. That prison has been crystallized as your personality, and most people identify with the prison as who they are because they know nothing else. You cannot remember how it was being a baby who was wide open consciousness and one with everything. So this becomes your identity. The prison becomes your identity and who you think you are. And it also contains or generates a frequency, because your consciousness is basically filtered through this prison complex, which is represented by the colored part of the scale here, or you see on the screen. The levels 20 to 640, that's the level of mind, you might call it. And from 670 to 1000, that's the level of consciousness, because that's beyond the mind. That you have escaped the mind prison when you have reached non-duality and beyond. So I'm going to mostly be focusing on the level of mind in this video, because that's what's most relevant for people at this time. And for the record, I myself was born in the mid-300s, like so many light workers are, and I went all the way down to 50 and spent a couple of years there in high negativity, took in a lot of negativity, and then I turned around my life and rapidly catapulted up the scale and met enlightened teachers when I reclaimed my birth level around 350, 60. I met a teacher synchronistically, and that he helped me, his energy field and whatnot helped me to very quickly get into the love levels, which and I've been remaining in those love levels, higher level of 500s and now close to 640. For a long time, integrating and maturing and also having upgrades to my energy system and whatnot, because you can't really get into enlightenment levels without your physical body being ready for it, the nervous system and whatnot. So all these things have to be upgraded gradually over time. So that's my story in a nutshell. I'm going to probably make a video more details later, but that's why I have such a intimate understanding of this scale and every main level, because I've been through all the main levels, and I've also peeked into non-duality for a full day in a big satori, so I have a pretty good idea how that works through that level is too. So anyway, the crystallized prison complex that you identify with as your personality or who you are contains all these layers, and your consciousness is filtered through those layers and projected onto reality, and then reflected back to you in the form of your destiny and your life and your circumstances and what people you have around you and all sorts of, basically everything. And the idea is to use those reflections to peel off the onion and dismantle this prison, because the reflections will trigger things in you, and those things are the negativity and the programming and the artificial prison complex that's been created in you that you need to dismantle. And you do that by focusing inside with whatever awareness you have available, because most of your awareness, depending on your level, is tied up in being projected out onto the world through this prison complex. But you always have a certain percentage of your awareness or your full consciousness available to do inner work. So you have to work with whatever level or percentage of awareness, which is indicated by the integrated percentage on the scale here, like up to 99% integrated. You have at the top of the scale in the love levels, you have a lot of awareness available. But then again, at those levels, you're battling even deeper issues. So you need all that awareness in that battle. So in the beginning, let's say you're starting in the 200 levels because you're born in the 300s, you drop down to 200 and or below 200, and you have to start where you are. And then you have very little awareness available, but you have to use what little you have, and you have to meditate to sort of increase the awareness that you actually have awareness, that you can be aware of your own thoughts and whatnot and your mind stuff. And then you can use that percentage of awareness that you have to let go of negativity that's reflected back to you by reality and by the surroundings, instead of being triggered or acting out the triggering and blaming the world and the people around you and whatnot. You simply use the reflections to dismantle the prison, and that frees up more awareness. As the more you integrate yourself, the more you free up your awareness. And that's how you increase your level of consciousness. You're gradually dismantling the prison complex that you think is your identity. And the whole prison complex is always, all the tires or levels of it is always tied back to this primal core wounding, core separation, which is inflamed with rage, which is why even small things can really trigger people, because it ties all the way back to that core separation of feeling completely unworthy and unloved. That's what that separation is. So that's why people can get super triggered, and they can get so inflamed that they attack people and do violent stuff. And many times you will see they have black eyes. That's when they're really triggered, because they're basically taken over by this inflammation, has taken over the whole system. So you cannot help but act the level you're at and get the reflections, because each main level is a paradigm. So it's a sort of closed loop, each level. So you get, you attract that life, or you project your consciousness through the levels of mind, and you attract whatever level you're at. So if you're in the 300s, you attract a very different life and surroundings and people around you and friends than if you're way below 200 in the victim abuse levels, for example. So that's how it works in a nutshell, but there are more to it. I'm going to make more videos explaining more about how to raise your level of consciousness most efficiently, but this video is about explaining the scale and why we have levels at all. So I think I've explained why we have the levels of consciousness, or levels of mind, rather, because the levels of consciousness above non-duality and those levels are more difficult to explain, or you have to be at those levels to really understand what's going on there. But that's more advanced stuff. Most people need to get to the level of love. That should be the focus for most people, because you can't really hope to get enlightened unless you can get to unconditional love first, in most cases at least. So anyway, the main levels of consciousness, you start with victim abuse level, which is below 200, right? That's where most people on this planet still are, and has been historically. The whole planet has been in victim abuse, the victim abuse paradigm, which is why we have such a ingrained negative totalitarian system, which is reflected in governments and the invisible world government and whatnot, who basically, these kind of governments are basically a reflection of the victim abuse mentality of the people, because the people are in victim consciousness, so they will attract an abusing government. Just like like a victimized woman, a battered woman will attract a pimp to dominate her and use her for money and whatnot. It's the same kind of thing on a global scale, and has been like this for all of known history. But the planet is about, in a process of being freeing itself, at these days. That's what the whole Ascension project is all about, right? So the victim abuse, we know all about how that works. It's very, everybody has been there. Everybody has an experience with that level, probably, most likely. Because you will dip into those levels, even if you're born in the 300s, like most lightworkers. You will most likely go down, at least have a taste of the victim abuse levels for a while, because that sort of scares you up the scale again, or catapults you in the opposite direction. So most people are around 200, below 200, or right above 200 in the animality level. So animality basically is very robotic. There is no heart. Heart has not started to open. There is no heart involved. It's basically just automatic survival, 3D body-oriented kind of life, which is why you see above the scale as a right mechanical with an arrow to the left and freedom with an arrow to the right. Because the more down scale you go, the more mechanical you become. You become like a robot because your mind is so packed with negativity and triggers that basically you walk around all day triggered. You know, everything that happens almost triggers you. So you just knee-jerk react to everything that happens. And that's how many people live their lives, more or less. So they're basically almost like robots just acting out triggers all the time because they're so full of them. You know, you see people constantly angry for many things, for everything that happens. You know, they're always triggered. And, you know, the whole leftist movement, for example, the progressive leftists, they're also very deep in the down in the lower levels of the scale, you know, below 200, many of them. And they are always triggered by everything, you know, everything that happens. They see some news, they see some news headline, they write long comments and they go onto social media and argue about it for all day. They're super triggered all the time because they cannot help it. They're completely mechanical. They can't help because they haven't focused inwards to de-trigger themselves or dismantle the triggers. They always blame. They always put the blame out on the world and the external realities and whatnot. So the more you go up the scale, the more freedom you have because you get rid of the triggers. So you also make room for pause between input and output. That's what awareness does, right? You have awareness to see, okay, this is a trigger coming up in me. I'm letting it go, and boom, it's gone. And you don't act it out. That's freedom. That's taking responsibility for your own mind and your own self and your own freedom and your own ascension up the scale process, right? So most people who are interested in these kind of videos are most likely born in the 300s somewhere because I've calibrated my more than 1,000 people, I guess, in the last 15 years or so, and with dosing rods, and I can basically gauge people's main level just by looking at them at these days because I know the scale so well. And when you reach a certain level, it's become more easy to see. Also, you pick it up like a vibration or just intuitively. But I know that most people they come into life in the 300s, those who volunteered for this mission, and most of them are interested in these kind of things. So if you're watching this, you're most likely born in the 300s, you're most likely touched below 200 at some point in your life, and you're most likely reclaimed your 300 level and maybe gone up into the 400s, and maybe very few, some people also might have even gone into the 500s. But that I haven't found many people in the 500s. I measured, a lot of people before on the website I had before I did this service, and I think I only had one or two people who of several hundred who was in the 500s. But anyway, so the empathy level is where this planet is sort of going. You need to be in the empathy. You need to be in the 300s to be part of the ascension process, to be part of the new earth. And because that's when the heart chakra and the heart starts to open and you start to develop heart and empathy. That happens in the 300 levels. And you also have a cleansing emotional storm, because all the negativity you picked up in the lower levels has to be let go of in that level. So you get a lot of ups and downs and a lot of emotional cleansing. And when that cleansing storm is sort of finished, you can enter into reason, or the 400 level. And reason means, it doesn't mean you're only reasoning in your mind, okay? It doesn't mean that you're always, it means that you sort of, your life is based around reason. You have crystallized yourself as a personality who is very straightforward, very, very strong in the world. You have a strong personality. You can be very successful in the world, in the worldly life, in whatever you do. You can be a scientist or a lawyer, or any kind of job. You will be in these levels of the 400s. You will usually be very successful with whatever you do in life, because you have a strong, crystallized, and very clean cut personality structure. The prison has been stripped down to more essential stuff and not so much negativity anymore, and a lot of light is coming through, a lot of consciousness is coming through that prison of the 400s, which gives you insights and wisdom, which is drawn from the higher levels, but you're still very much caught up in the intellectual kind of way of orienting yourself. Although you can be drawn from the higher levels, you can draw intuition and these things too, but it's a kind of a mix in between. But reason becomes important at level science. You're very scientific minded, oriented, most likely. You can be, even in the higher 400s, you can be genius scientists like Einstein and Newton and these kind of people, who contribute a bit big. But you can also be in the 400s and be a regular anonymous, just a good guy, basically. I have people in my family, one person who is in the 400s, he doesn't know anything about spirituality or the scale, but you can just sense his vibration, and he is also very successful as a person and a very good person. You can just sense his presence that is just above what most people are at, even though he has no idea about any of these things. So you don't need to know about the scale, know about spirituality, anything to be. You can be in the higher 400s and still, be just a regular guy, but a good guy, and but you still have core issues, you still have the core wounding, and you still have a sort of a prison inside. And the prison in the 400s can be hard to escape, because who can you look up to? In the world, you're pretty much on top of the world. In the higher 400s, who can you look up to? If you don't know about any enlightened teacher or people who are higher than you on the scale, it can be very hard to escape that level, because it feels very good. You feel like you're on top of the world, you have good confidence, you feel pretty good in life, you're pretty happy, So for that reason, it can be hard. It's like a bottleneck. And getting into the love level usually requires to an encounter with somebody who is most likely has to be enlightened in the higher enlightened levels, like a fully enlightened teacher. For me, I know for sure I would most likely never get into the love level if I wasn't for my first enlightened teacher, and being exposed to his energies, and nothing to do with his teaching. He didn't even have a teaching, just joked around mostly, but his energy field does all the work, and being exposed to that energy field upgrades you, and it also blows away a lot of the prison complex automatically, almost just by him focusing his attention on you. That's enough to give you massive upgrades, and to blow away and bring up all the negativity in you, so you can process it out. That's what happens. That's what Bashar talks about all the time also. That's why they cannot have physical contact yet, because it brings up all the negativity. The whole prison complex comes up at once when you encounter an alien ET of a very high level. And they're even higher than 1000, because that's the human limitation. So that's why you can't have physical contact with ETs. It will bring up everything in you at the same time, and it will give you a psychotic shock and scare the hell out of you if that would happen. So you get a lighter version of that when you're exposed to a high level enlightened teacher. But you can handle that because he is not that far away removed from your level. So it works, even though many people can be triggered by the teacher too, because it can flip and touch the core wounding, and you can project that out onto the teacher, and you can basically sort of hate the teacher. That can easily happen. If he says the wrong thing, you can blame him for this and that, but it's your own core issues being touched, because everything comes up in the teacher's presence, in his high frequency presence. So the love levels, if you reach those levels, that's basically sainthood, especially the higher love levels, like above 540. Then you most likely will have Kundalini experiences, and what will be considered supernatural stuff for most people will happen, and things you didn't even think was possible that you might have read about will actually happen in those levels, the 500s. You might have out-of-body experiences. You might have many different weird things happening. And if you reach those levels and you walk around in the city or with normal people will look at you like you're some kind of alien or something. That happened to me, especially in the first years or two, because you have such strong Kundalini energy, and you basically radiate such a light or energy that people haven't seen anything like it before. So I was walking around whole neighborhoods or city blocks, like 20, 40 people would just stop what they were doing and look at me as I was walking down the street, and I was doing nothing special, I didn't even think I was nothing too special, but I knew I was in the 500s, but I didn't know how people look at me like that. I didn't understand why at first, because you can't see it yourself, right? Although you know something has happened to you. So that's sort of an indicator that you're in those higher love levels. You will, and especially women and children will be very sensitive to it, and women will like it and pick up on that energy and just like being around you and suck up the energy, because women are very receptive, while also kids and children are receptive to it. But a lot of men, they will be angry at you for no reason. They will be triggered by your presence because they are more like a competition ego. They don't understand. If you smile at them, they will think you're mocking them. So you give a man a loving smile from that level, and they will think you're mocking them, but you're really trying to, give them unconditional love and basically give them a transmission of love, but I don't understand it. So I stopped really quickly doing that, because in the beginning I did it a lot, and men would always attack me physically. They thought I was mocking them. But women, that's a different story, but women can misunderstand it and think you're hitting on them, and that it's about them, but you're really just loving them for being a human being or being a soul. So they can't understand that, so they can misunderstand the unconditional love that you basically radiate, and you try to give people at that level by just being around. So it becomes very hard in the love levels. It becomes hard to be around people. So after a while, you just start to isolate yourself. At least I did, because either people misunderstand or it just doesn't compute, because you're so different from what most people are like around the 200 levels, right? And you are basically a saint on those low levels, and they have no idea, they have no context to put that into with a regular person walking around. It's different if you actually are a saint in the world, like you are in a monastery and people understand. But when you're just a regular guy, a person, it's different. So if you get to the love levels, you might experience those things, at least if that happens before the rest of humanity catches up, or the whole ascension thing happens, and the whole planet is upgraded to those levels. Then it will be not so different anymore, because everybody will be there. But that might take a while, I don't know. So basically, in the love levels, you will probably most likely spend a lot of time maturing and integrating, and then after doing that for a long time, you might get into what is called as a dark night of the soul, because that's when the core trauma, core separation, and the innermost negativity starts to come up in you. And for me, that went on for many years, and I didn't know what it was, because I went from being so blissed out until suddenly this extremely negative things come up, and I got a lot of anger, and I didn't understand what was happening. But eventually, after many, many years, I was able to heal those things with the help of what you might call a divine or ET/ET intervention, which I talk about in another video. I can't go into detail about that here, but that was not an easy heal. It took a whole day and quite heavy interference to be able to heal those things. But I had pretty bad core issues. Not everybody will have that, so it all depends. But that's why, if you look at the bottom of the scale, I have ice at the bottom, because you are like a block of ice at the bottom of the scale. People are like blocks of ice, and then you melt above 200. You start melting, become more flexible, and then the water starts to heat up in the higher 400s and whatnot, and in the 500s the water starts to boil eventually, and when it's boiling, that's when these core issues and negativity will start to come up. And when you get rid of those, eventually you can transform into gas, which is the higher enlightenment levels. And this gas is more like, like beingness. You have no fixed center anymore, because you are everything. You are one with everything. So you become pure presence or pure context or isness. And at the very bottom of the scale, I've included something that's easy to remember and easy to understand too. It's relevant for all the main levels. In the bottom of the scale, everything happens to you. So you're a victim of everything. You're a victim. You feel like you're a victim of circumstances, and everything happens to you, and you can do nothing about it because you feel like a victim. Then in the middle of the scale, everything happens by you, And by that I mean you feel like you have to struggle, like there's a lot of energy involved, a lot of doing, a lot of, I have to plan, I have to struggle to get this done and, reach my goals. That's what the rajas and, the middle of the energy activity in the middle of the scale is all about. Everything happens by you, which means if something goes wrong, you blame yourself or you blame others easily too, because, you're responsible for making everything happen, you feel like, at least at those levels. And then you get into the higher end of the scale, in the love levels, you start to understand that more and more that everything happens through you. That life sort of effortlessly flows through you, and you don't have to struggle that much. Things just come and fall into place by synchronicity much more and more, because you're not struggling to sort of fulfill all sorts of illusory ambitions that you have at the lower levels. You don't need those. You sort of let go of all those ambitions, or most of them. So then the life that you're supposed to live anyway just starts to flow more freely and naturally through you, and you don't have to struggle because you don't have that many goals. You're just being is enough, right? Whatever life you have is good enough, because you have nothing to prove, or at least not as much as you used to, and you don't have nowhere to go really, and you're just more happy with the life that you have, and whatever comes to you naturally, and you don't have to feel that you have to become something or struggle to be something. So that starts to happen more and more as you mature in the love levels, and then when you finally reach the enlightenment levels, then you realize that everything happens as me. So there is no more doing at all. Everything just unfolds. Your life just unfolds completely effortlessly, and there is no doing involved, because you have nowhere else to go. You don't have any ambitions. You just go through your day and live day by day, and there is nothing else to do than exactly what you're doing in every moment. So that's how your perception of life changes. Although everything always happens as you and through you, kind of, but you don't see it in the lower levels, so that's why you struggle, right? So that's just how it works. And I mean, if you want to know about the frequencies, as a final thing in this video, the frequencies, I got the top and the bottom from an old Bashar video. He always talks about people's frequencies, and he even measures people's frequencies and it corresponds to a level of consciousness. So I got the top and the bottom, and then I calibrated the rest of the frequencies using dosing rods to fill in the blanks, so to speak, to match the scale of consciousness with the levels of consciousness, like 20 to 1000. And then later I watched several videos from Bashar in which he basically confirmed that my calibrations of the frequencies are pretty correct. So what you get here is the frequency that corresponds to each level of consciousness, and the frequencies are generated by the soul or the consciousness being filtered through whatever is left of your prison complex, the crystallized personality structure. That's what generates your frequency, your core vibration. But you can obviously go up and down the scale a lot. If you meditate, you will usually spike up to a higher frequency, and if you get angry, you will spike down to a lower frequency. But you in the resting core frequency is where you are at the level or scale of consciousness, as your core level, basically. So the frequencies are come from Bashar, and that's, you can't really, you have to take it for what it is. It doesn't matter that much anyway, because you shouldn't get too upset about numbers. Like Bashar always also say, that having to know your frequency actually lowers your frequency, because you should just trust that you are on the right path. And if having to know it all the time means that you're sort of not trusting that you're on the right path. So it actually lowers your frequency, at least temporarily. So that's also why I stopped with measuring people as a service on my website, because a lot of people got too obsessed with the numbers, and so I don't really do that anymore. But I will make videos in the future where I can help you. You can basically gauge where you are on the scale more or less accurately, just by logic and doing some exercises and some knowing certain things I will talk about in future videos. But that's pretty much it for this video. So I'll see you next time.